After my dad's funeral, my mom expelled my grandma. What happened next changed everything. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. The air around us felt heavy, thick with unspoken grief. My father had just been laid to rest, yet the enormity of his absence hit like a hurricane. I stood there, frozen, my heart a whirlwind of emotions. Tears streamed down my face, blurring the sight of the funeral flowers, their vibrant colors lost in a sea of morning gray. Mom, she was a mere shell of herself. Her usual spark extinguished, replaced by a haunting silence. I could see the tremors in her hands as she gripped the edge of the car door, knuckles white against the black paint. Suddenly, her voice sliced through the quiet, sharp and unexpected. "Get out. Just get out." She screamed, eyes blazing, looking at Grandma like she was a ghost. Grandma, frail and trembling, took a step back, confusion swirling in her eyes. The whole world seemed to halt as if we had all collectively inhaled, waiting for the next breath. It wasn't just anger, it was a tidal wave of pain, betrayal, and something darker, something I couldn't yet name. What happened next seemed surreal. As the funeral attendees whispered among themselves, their voices a soft murmur of shock, I watched as my mother's rage unfolded. Grandma, for all her love, all her comforting meals cooked in chipped plates, was suddenly the enemy. She stumbled back, tears welling up, her fragile frame shaking. "But I'm your mother," she pleaded, and it struck me this was no ordinary family feud. Mom tore through her words, each one edged with bitterness. "You weren't there when I needed you. You abandoned us." The crowd gasped. I felt the blood rush to my face, a hot shame washing over me. My grandma's eyes widened, an old hurt surfacing, memories clashing like storm clouds. What had happened in our family? An eerie silence followed, as everyone awaited the fallout, the tension crackling like static in the air. I felt dizzy, lost between my love for both the women in front of me. This shocking scene ignited a storm of questions in my mind. How could Mom push Grandma away after losing Dad? What secrets were buried beneath the hatred boiling over? The conclusion to this family drama felt like a runaway train barreling towards an unknown destination, and I had no idea how to stop it. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The days following the funeral were shrouded in a grieving fog that clung to the edges of my mind. Each morning, I awoke to the same muted world, the absence of my father reverberating in every silence, echoing through the walls of our home. The house felt emptier without him, every room a mausoleum of memories I desperately wished to escape. Mom had taken to her grief with a fierce intensity. She didn't talk much anymore. When she did, it was often laced with an edge that startled me. Gone was the gentle laughter that used to fill our home, replaced by a brittle facade. I'd find her sitting on the couch, her eyes vacant, staring at old photographs of happier times. In those moments, I could almost feel the cold space where Dad should have been, a void that enveloped her completely. As the sun began to set one evening, I ventured to the kitchen, the familiar aroma of burnt toast filling the air. Mom was at the stove, her movements quick and frantic. "Are you hungry?" she asked without turning around, her voice tense and clipped. "No, I just then why are you here?" she snapped, and I flinched as if struck. "Just let me be. I can't think with you hovering over me." I swallowed hard, restraining the surge of hurt that threatened to spill over. I had tried to be there for her, but it seemed like I was meeting with resistance at every turn. After the cataclysm of the funeral, we had grown increasingly distant, like two planets drifting apart in the void of space. Feeling suffocated by her fury, I retreated into my room, seeking solace in the dim light. There, I scrolled through my phone, desperately looking for any kind of connection. It was in these moments that I found small bursts of kindness, messages from friends offering their support, reminders that the world continued to turn outside our grief. Yet one message caught my eye, a simple text from my grandma that melted through my frozen heart. "I love you, my dear. Always." Tears pricked at my eyes, the kindness breaking through like a ray of light cutting through the clouds. It was a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness, but the heaviness of my mother's words still loomed large. The following days were an intricate dance of avoidance. I walked on eggshells around Mom, careful not to provoke her wrath, but the tension was palpable. Each shared room felt like a battlefield, every word exchanged threaded with fear. The door between us felt locked, the key lost in the chaos. After a week spent in turmoil, I finally gathered the courage to reach out to Grandma. Her voice on the other end of the line was a soothing balm. "How are you holding up, sweetheart?" she asked, with the gentleness I so desperately missed. "That I don't know, Grandma. Everything feels so broken," I confessed, taking comfort in her unwavering love. "Remember, darling, storms don't last forever. You must be the light in the dark. Can you promise me that?" The conversation ended with slight relief, yet the undercurrents of our family storm still swirled menacingly around me, unaddressed. That evening, as I sat in my room, I made a decision. Perhaps I could bridge the chasm between my mother and grandmother. After all, if anything could heal our family, it had to be love. The next morning, I tentatively approached Mom. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice wavering slightly. She looked up, her expression a mix of surprise and fatigue. "About what?" she replied, a challenge in her tone. "About Grandma, about everything." "I think we need to talk about Dad, about how we're feeling," I said, hoping to connect her tangled emotions. "What could you possibly understand?" She snapped, but I guessed there was a flicker of pain in her eyes that suggested more than just anger. "Why can't you just let it go?" "Because I can't. We can't." I couldn't keep the frustration from creeping in. "Pushing her away after losing Dad only makes it worse." Her expression hardened, and I braced myself for the onslaught that would follow. Yet, that's when the doorbell rang, its shrill chime cutting through the tension. Mom hesitated, glancing towards the door, the moment of confrontation abruptly interrupted. I shared a quick glance with her, an unspoken question hanging heavy in the air. Who could it be? Whatever I had been dreading was put on hold as she moved toward the front door, uncertainty shadowing her features. When Mom opened the door, it was as if fate itself had intervened. There stood Grandma, carrying not only a small paper bag filled with her famous cookies but also a glimmer of hope in her weary eyes. "I thought you might want to share a memory," she said softly, her voice steady as she dared to enter the boundary we had both so painfully created. In that moment, I felt time freeze as if the entire universe was holding its breath, waiting to see if we would break the barriers of silence and resentment. Would we allow kindness to flow between us, or would the pain continue to knit a web of isolation? The answer teetered on the edge of our unspoken fears, a delicate balance on the precipice of healing and heartbreak. And in that fleeting moment of hesitation, the air changed, washing over me with both trepidation and an unexpected thrill of possibility. What would come next? The air thrummed with tension as Grandma stepped across the threshold, trembling with an aura both inviting and cautious. Behind her stood the remnants of a fall sunset, the fading light painting the world outside in hues of orange and purple. It was as if nature itself was urging us to embrace this fragile moment. "Mom," I murmured, casting a hopeful glance in her direction. She stood frozen, caught between a desire to hold on to her grief and the undeniable warmth of Grandma's presence. "Hi, Mom," Grandma said softly, her voice a feather brushing against the storm. My mother's breath hitched as she cradled the anger and sorrow that had been built up over the past weeks. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, the sharpness of her words slicing through the stillness. "That I brought cookies," Grandma offered, her eyes glimmering with tenderness, but the weight of loss hung heavy in the air. "I thought we could talk, maybe share our favorite memories of your dad. It might help." A flicker of vulnerability crossed Mom's face as she weighed her options, the door remaining half open between love and resentment. I held my breath, hoping for her to take a step forward, to somehow bridge the distance that had widened between them. It was a precarious negotiation, but I could see the conflicting emotions battling inside her. "Fine," Mom finally said, the word escaping her lips with reluctance. She stepped aside, reluctantly inviting Grandma into the small sanctuary of our home. As Grandma shuffled inside, the scent of chocolate chip cookies filled the room, stirring dormant memories that hung heavy like dust motes suspended in time. Grandma's gentle presence brought with it a comfort I had been aching for, as if the gravitas of the world outside fell away, leaving just us three, the relic of our family, clinging to fleeting moments. "Remember that time we made cookies together?" I ventured, hoping my words could ignite a spark of warmth. "We had flour everywhere. Do you think the kitchen ever really recovered?" My laugh felt desperate but genuine, and to my surprise, it broke the ice slightly, coaxing hesitant smiles from both women. Mom's lips twitched as Grandma nods, her chuckle light and airy. "Oh, you were such a little rascal, sneaking bites of dough while I wasn't looking." That small exchange opened a crack in the sanctuary of grief that our family had become, allowing a little light to seep through. Moments passed, punctuated with laughter as we recalled shared memories of my dad, his goofy sense of humor, the endless games of charades, the way he would dance without music whenever he tried to cheer us up. Each story became a thread, weaving together our fragmented hearts, even if just for a moment. Grandma's kind eyes glimmered with unshed tears as she mentioned how much Dad had adored both of us. "You were the stars of his universe. You still are," she said, her voice thick with emotion. A lump formed in my throat, settling heavily as conflicting feelings bubbled within. I witnessed the subtle shift as Mom's demeanor softened, her walls beginning to crumble brick by brick. Yet beneath that lightness lay the oppressive weight of grief, clinging stubbornly to each of us. As the evening wore on, the tension melted into a shared sorrow that slowly began to heal the gaping wounds. I felt the bittersweet warmth of connection, one that gave rise to a sense of hope but also reminded me of the struggle that still lay ahead. Just as I thought we found a moment of peace, a loud crash shattered the stillness. Startled, we turned to see the remnants of a vase that had been on the shelf, shattered, reflecting the jagged edges of our emotions. Mom gasped, her eyes darting toward me, the pain and anger igniting once again. "See? This is what happens. Nothing ever stays fixed," she erupted, her voice strained against the tenderness that had blossomed moments before. "Mom, it was an accident," I pleaded as dread coiled tightly around my heart. "We're all trying here. We need to talk about the things we've been avoiding." Grandma stepped closer, her presence a reassuring warmth against the encroaching tide of despair. "What your mother means is that we still have deep wounds, and we cannot repair everything overnight." Her voice was like a gentle tide gradually returning to shore, even as the storm threatened to break again. Mom's eyes filled with tears, cascading down her cheeks. A bittersweet musk of sorrow and frustration enveloped her like a cloak. "I just miss him so much," she choked out, the walls closing in around the vulnerable truth behind her fury. In that moment, her pain escaped the confines of anger, raw and trembling in the air between us. I felt the ache of loss ripple through the room, weaving a tapestry of grief we could all acknowledge yet couldn't fully mend. "Me too, Mom," I whispered, stepping closer to her, the walls of our distance whispering ever so quietly, urging us to lean into this moment of hurt. "But we have to face it together." The flicker of hope dangled like a flame in the wind, fragile yet persistent. However, just as I thought we might finally bridge that last remaining distance, the doorbell rang again, cutting through our fragile tranquility, and my heart sank with the dread of what might follow. "Who could that be?" Grandma murmured, her brow furrowing as she exchanged worried glances with Mom. I reached for the doorknob, uncertainty thrumming through me like an electric current. As I opened the door, my breath hitched and my heart raced. It was the last person I expected to see, and with them came a secret buried deep in our shared histories, one that had the potential to shatter the fragile moments we were just beginning to weave together. As the door swung open, I was met with a face I hadn't seen in years, a mix of shock and disbelief washing over me like cold water. Standing there, disheveled and breathless, was my estranged uncle, my dad's brother. "Eli," he whispered, almost as if saying my name would break the fragile balance that hung in the air. "Uncle Dan." I blinked, trying to reconcile this unexpected presence with the memories of family gatherings that had grown distant with time and tension. "What are you doing here?" His eyes darted past me into our home, wide with understanding yet full of an undercurrent that made my heart race again. I have to talk to your mother," he confessed, his voice low, thick with emotions I couldn't quite place. That I hesitated, instinctively sensing that his arrival had the potential to disrupt what little peace we had just started to cultivate. But Grandma stepped forward, her hand resting gently on my shoulder. "Eli, let him in," she said softly, the wisdom in her voice urging me to trust. Reluctantly, I stepped aside, opening the door wider, the familiar scent of the cookies we had baked lingering in the air becoming a poignant reminder of times more innocent. Uncle Dan stepped inside, and with him came an uneasy wave of nostalgia mixed with troubled memories that had permeated our family for so long. Mom's eyes widened in surprise, the flush of anger from earlier fading into confusion as she took in the sight of her brother-in-law. "Dan," she struggled to find her voice, emotions cascading through her like a turbulent river, threatening to overflow. "What are you doing here?" "I heard about Kevin," he breathed, grief etching lines across his face. "I wanted to see how you're holding up." He hesitated, words choking in his throat as if they were weighted with years of regret. "I know I haven't been there, but I want to make things right." For a heartbeat, silence hung between us, a fresh batch of tension filling the room like an unwelcome guest. Just as I thought Mom might react with anger, her expression softened into an unusual blend of longing and hurt. "You left us when we needed you the most," she mouthed the words, her lashes glistening with tears. "You just disappeared." "I know," Dan replied, sorrow thick in his voice. "I should have been here for you, for all of you. But I was afraid of what my presence might bring back. I wasn't ready to face the pain either." His gaze shifted to Grandma, who stood like a steadied rock in a turbulent sea. "I didn't know how to reconcile what happened between us after the memories flooded back, darkened by shadows of a family splintered by grief and unspoken words. I watched as the air grew heavy with all that had gone unsaid about my father, Uncle's disappearance, and the rift that left us all feeling so fractured that it doesn't matter now, Dan," Mom said finally, her voice a whisper. "We've all been lost without him." In that moment, I felt the fragility of our circumstances like a fresh wound reopen just when we were learning to breathe again. But beneath the surface of pain, I sensed something else, a flicker of a chance for reconnection, for healing long overdue. However, before I could contemplate the weight of those possibilities, the cracks in the foundation of our family continued to threaten our meager moments of warmth. "Actually," Uncle Dan said, his voice a sharp contrast to the tender atmosphere, "there's something I need to tell you all." His eyes darted around the room, full of urgency. "It's about Kevin, something I found that could change everything." "Change what?" Grandma interjected, her eyes narrowing with concern. "I found something among his things, something he wanted you to know. Something related to the accident." Dawn revelation hung heavily in the air, the words leaving an explicit invitation to spiral into places we had long avoided. My heart raced as dread clawed at my insides, visions of what might emerge from the shadows of our shared history flashing in my mind. The sudden return of Uncle Dan felt like a harbinger of unsettling truths that might threaten our fragile reconstruction of family bonds. "We can't keep running from our past, you know that," he continued, voice steady yet laced with fear. "This might explain more than you think about why he was taken from us." The room fell silent save for the thudding of my own heart echoing in my ears. I felt as though the ground was slipping beneath my feet, leaving only anxiety in its wake. What if this secret was a bridge or, conversely, a rift that shattered our already trembling foundations? Mom's expression shifted from confusion to fear, as if she sensed the storm brewing on the horizon that we were not quite ready to confront. "What do you mean?" she whispered, the fragility of her vulnerability captured in those two words. Before Dan could respond, the tension tightened around us, a knot of anticipation and dread locking us in place as we stood on the precipice of another potential fracture in our family dynamic. The weight of that unspoken truth loomed ominously, and in that moment, I realized we were standing at a crossroad, one that threatened to draw the curtains over the inkling of hope we had only just discovered. The atmosphere in the room thickened, the air fraught with unvoiced emotions and burgeoning uncertainty. I could feel my heart flutter erratically in my chest, both terrified and desperate for answers as the shadows of the past clawed their way toward us, threatening to engulf our hard-won sense of stability. Uncle Dan's presence had stirred a cacophony of memories, some soft with nostalgia but most wrapped in pain, like the dog-eared edges of a well-read book marred by time and sorrow. "Dan, please," Mom breathed, her voice barely audible as she seemingly wrestled with emotions too complex to articulate. "What is this all about? What did you find?" He took a measured breath as though he had been holding a secret far too long, and I could see the tremor in his hands. "I didn't want to bring this up, not now, but I think it's important. Kevin, he had been working on something. Something involving his research. He was digging into places he shouldn't have, places." Grandma interjected, her eyebrows knitting tightly together. "What kind of places?" Uncle Don's gaze fell downward, his despair palpable. "Legal documents, files. They held information about the accident that killed him. Something that points to more than just an accident." Confusion spiraled into a torrent of questions. Why hadn't anyone mentioned this before? Was this why the grief had settled in our home like a permanent winter? I felt anger boiling just beneath the surface, not only directed at Uncle Dan, but also at my mother and my grandmother. How had they allowed the secrets to fester in silence for so long? "We need to see them, Dan," I urged, finding a strength I didn't know I had. "If there is anything that might explain what happened, we can't ignore it." Mom shot me a look that mingled fear with a hint of pride, almost as if she realized that in this moment, I was standing at the threshold of choosing how our family narrative would continue. Would we finally confront the darkness, or would we recoil, letting the past swallow us whole once more? "Are you sure, Eli?" she asked, her voice tremulous. "You don't know what it could lead to, and it might open wounds that we've only just begun to heal. Or it might give us the answers we deserve," I countered, the weight of my conviction surprising even myself. Dan nodded, as if his agreement was all the validation I needed. "I think it's time you all know the truth." Besides, Kevin was passionate about his work, wanted to fight for justice. A tentative truce settled over the room, an unwritten agreement that we would face whatever lay ahead together, despite the strife that had marred so many years. But as Uncle Dan pulled a folded envelope from his jacket, fear knotted in my gut. What new truths would this piece of paper unravel? Before he could fully open it, the doorbell rang, a jarring intrusion into the sacred moment. As my heart raced, Grandma's expression shifted from contemplative to startled. "Who could that be?" she whispered, concern weaving through her voice. Mom moved briskly toward the door, leaving us in a bubble of anxious anticipation. My thoughts whirled, imagining who might be on the other side, perhaps an unwelcome visitor stirring up pain we weren't ready to confront. The door swung open, revealing a figure I had never expected to see. It was my father's old friend, James, his face a gallery of conflict. "I need to speak with you all," he stammered, looking almost ghost-like in the dim light of the hallway. "About what?" Mom shot back, her defensiveness instinctively kicking in. "Now is not the time. There's something you don't know, something important regarding Kevin's research," he said breathlessly, glancing nervously between us, the weight of unspoken truths lining his brow. Uncle Don's grip on the envelope tightened as he stepped forward. "What do you mean?" James shifted uncomfortably, and it was then that I felt the earth sway beneath us once more. "It involves his colleagues and the project he was working on. It's about the accident." My stomach churned. The walls of our carefully constructed world were beginning to crumble around us, and I struggled to hold on to hope in the midst of upheaval. We weren't ready, no one was ready, but we had inadvertently opened Pandora's box. Mom glanced back at me, her expression torn between fear of the past and the primal instinct to protect, but the choice had already been made. It was too late to turn back. "Please, come in," she said reluctantly, stepping aside, a bridge forming for the truth we had so desperately avoided. As James entered and the door closed behind him, I felt a sense of inevitability wash over me. Whatever revelations were about to unfold would once again reshape the landscape of our family, leaving us standing at the edge of unimaginable truths. My heart sank, knowing that nothing could prepare us for the storm looming just over the horizon. When the door clicked shut, a tension filled the air, thick as smoke. James stepped unsteadily into the living room, his eyes fluttering with the uncertainty of a man who knows too much yet feels helpless to impart it. He glanced at my mom as if silently asking for permission, but she looked as wary as a deer caught in headlights. "Please, let's sit," was all she managed, motioning us toward the living room where the ghost of Kevin's absence still loomed, materializing into the space around us with every breath. Uncle Dan folded the envelope back into his pocket, sensing the discontent brewing as conversations turned into uncharted territory. James struggled to steady his voice. "I didn't expect to have to come here like this. I was hoping to reach out peacefully." He paused, shooting a glance at Grandma. "But time is running short, and there are things about Kevin's research I believe could paint the event of his death in a different light." "What do you mean by that?" I asked, impatience bubbling just beneath my surface. With each second that passed, the feeling of urgency grew like a wildflower through concrete cracks. James took a deep breath, and I could see the conflict swirling in his eyes, a tempest of truths he held too tightly. "The accident wasn't just an accident," he murmured, eyes flickering toward the memories scattered throughout the room, the family photos where everyone looked peaceful and whole, blissfully unaware of the storm to come. "James, please," Mom interjected, her voice shaking. "This isn't the time. We're still grieving, and Kevin wouldn't want this." "Maybe he would," James replied quietly. "What if his work was more than just research? What if he stumbled onto something that made him a target?" An electric tension lit up the room, making goosebumps rise on my skin. Grandma's hand trembled beside me, and I reached over, squeezing it, a silent acknowledgement that we were in this together. Tentatively, albeit, "What did he find?" Dan pressed, voice low and urgent. "That I can't say outright, but there were whispers of a project that linked to several key players in the accident. Money exchanged hands, and certain people didn't want his findings to see the light of day. It was dirty, dangerous work." James looked at each of us, his gaze searching for understanding. "A few days before he died, he mentioned feeling uneasy, like he was being watched." With each word, a nightmarish picture began to take form in my mind. Had Kevin been too close to cracking a case that may have implicated powerful figures? My hands balled into fists, frustration boiling within me. "So what now? Are you telling us Kevin was killed because of something he discovered?" "It's a possibility," James replied. "But you need the files. They contain proof, lost correspondence, reports he gathered. I can help you, but you have to promise me one thing: you have to be ready for the fallout, no matter what it reveals." My heart raced at the gravity of his words. Part of me felt a surge of anger at the thought of withholding such potential truth. Would the world we had built shatter completely? Would knowledge consume us, or would it offer closure that would allow us to mend the wounds? "Eli," Mom's voice trembled, pulling my attention back to her. "Are you sure you want to go down this path? Because I fear where it might lead." Before I could answer, a flash of emotion coursed through me. I was not the scared child anymore, hidden behind the walls of my family's grief. I wanted to fight for Kevin's truth. His legacy mattered not only to him but to us all. As I looked around the familiar room, I was struck by the realization that we were still a family, united in the midst of turmoil. "That I have to know," I admitted, my voice resolute. "I want to help uncover what really happened." Dark clouds settled behind Mom's eyes, but her lips formed a tentative smile, a flicker of pride blending with fear. "Then let's do this together," she whispered. James nodded, his tension dissipating slightly as he began to explain the steps we would take. I felt a small glimmer of hope amidst the heaviness, a gentle touch of warmth. That signaled we might uncover the truth together, regardless of the danger that lurked in the shadows. Just as the conversation reached a fragile crescendo, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen, followed by the unmistakable shatter of glass. Instinct kicked in, and my heart raced, knowing the serenity we had barely begun to reclaim was already at stake. We all turned to see Grandma hastily climbing to her feet, her face pale as her eyes widened in terror. "No, please, not now," she gasped, the color draining from her face as panic surged through her like a storm. "Grandma, what is it?" I called, moving toward her with concern. "It's the window," she murmured, her voice thick with dread. Someone's, but before she could finish, the front door swung open with a loud bang, revealing a figure standing in the shadows, their silhouette obscured yet eerily familiar. I felt a chill creep down my spine. This was not how it was supposed to be. This was not even close. Tension electrified the room, and in that moment, I knew we were not just unearthing the past. We were stepping onto a battlefield, one where the stakes had escalated from mere knowledge to our very safety. "Who are you?" I demanded, completely unequipped for what was about to unfold, but very much aware that everything was about to change again. The figure stepped forward into the dim light of the living room, and recognition washed over me like a tidal wave. It was Mark, a distant cousin I hadn't seen since Kevin's funeral. His presence had felt like an unwanted ghost at a gathering meant to celebrate memories, not destroy them. As he crossed the threshold, the air thickened with unresolved histories and unspoken tensions. "Eli," he shouted, voice heavy with urgency. "You have to listen to me. They're coming for you. And for all of us." With those words, the frail seams that held our fragile emotional state together began to unravel. Grandma's face was a mixture of disbelief and fear, her earlier dread now looming over us like a dark cloud ready to burst. Mom clutched my hand, her grasp tightening as if she could shield me from whatever chaos had come to haunt us next. "Mark, what are you talking about?" I demanded, trying to find my grounding amid the storm of confusion. That he took a deep breath, panic mixing with desperation in his eyes. "I found something Kevin left behind. He knew more than he ever told you, Eli. He left clues, papers hidden in his old office, things he thought would keep you safe while he was still here. But now they're after the truth, and they think you might hold it." "What do you mean, they're after the truth?" Mom interjected, her voice trembling. "You're not making sense." Mark's face soured, a shadow outlining the worry etched deeply on his features. "I overheard some conversations, men in suits, threats, things I was never meant to hear. They believe if Kevin's work surfaces, so will their secrets. They're willing to do anything to stop it." The room felt as though it was spinning, reality shimmering at the edges. My mind raced back to James' words about oppressors, men who would do anything to keep certain findings buried. The looming danger was no mere shadow, it was a tangible threat hovering over us all. "That we have to get out of here," Mark insisted, looking toward the door as the world beyond it felt increasingly hostile, like a predator lurking just out of sight. "We're not safe, not while they're searching for those files." No. Grandma uttered fiercely, her voice rising above the chaos. "This family has been through enough. We can't let fear dictate our lives any longer." "Grandma, please," I whispered, torn between the comfort of familiarity and the gnawing anxiety gripping my heart. "We need to listen to Mark." Suddenly, a loud banging reverberated from the front door, making all of us jump. It was agonizingly rhythmic, oppressive in nature, like a heartbeat quickening before crisis. "Eli, it's them!" Mark shouted as he moved toward the window, eyes darting to the old wooden frame that provided both shelter and exposure. "We can't stay here. We need a plan." But before we could form coherent thoughts or strategies, the door swung open again, and in walked a pair of dark-suited men whose expressions were unreadable, cold, calculating, and utterly devoid of remorse. I felt the breath catch in my throat as I backed away, my heart pounding in my ears, drowning out reason. "Where is he?" one of the men demanded, voice sharp and authoritative. "We know he left behind evidence. You have to give it to us, or things will take a dark turn." Reality shattered around us. The collapse of our world, once held together by love and shared grief, threatened to descend into chaos, a vivid, tangible nightmare where family ties could turn into shackles. "Get back!" Mom yelled, stepping in front of me, a fierce maternal instinct igniting as she brandished her phone like a weapon. "You can't just barge in here. We won't let you hurt us." "Very brave," the other man replied, voice laced with a condescending humor that sent icy tendrils crawling over my skin. "But courage won't protect you. If you care about the safety of your family, you'll hand over what you know about Kevin's research. We will make sure you all remain unharmed, but we don't know anything," I said, my voice rising in panic. We didn't know, a flash of something dangerous in the men's eyes sent me reeling. Then perhaps it's time to start. Learning, one of them said, inching closer, a predatory smile threatening my sense of safety. In that moment, overwhelmed by fear and confusion, I felt a surge of defiance. Kevin's legacy, wrapped in layers of danger and hidden truths, was awakening within me. I would not let their threats imprison me or my family. Eli, Mark's voice broke through the chaos, urgent and insistent. We need to find that evidence, you have to trust me. It's the only way to protect us. Just as I nodded, guilt and determination swirling in my chest, the power in the room shifted. The unknown men took a step back, suddenly distracted as the distant blare of sirens echoed in the night, closing in uncomfortably fast. What now? I whispered, dread pooling in the pit of my stomach. As the world outside began to erupt with noise, I realized our reckoning had begun, forcing us down an uncertain path fraught with danger and answers we were unprepared to confront, and then, through the chaos, came the crashing realization that truth wasn't a shield, it was a weapon. As the sirens echoed louder, ominous and relentless, I understood the war for Kevin's legacy would not only test our courage, it would demand sacrifice. And we would need to decide just how far we were willing to go to protect one another. With my heart racing, we stood at the precipice of everything we feared, and together, we faced the challenge that lay ahead. But would we be able to hold on to each other long enough to uncover the truth, or would this be the beginning of our undoing? The sirens wailed like lost souls, their shrill cries piercing through the thick fog of our fear. I felt as if the entire universe had shifted, leaving us vulnerable and unanchored. Mark's eyes met mine, and that flicker of hope, a spark amidst the chaos, briefly illuminated the dark corners of uncertainty that gripped us. Eli, he urged again, his voice trembling but unwavering. We can't wait. It's now or never. If we don't find that evidence, we risk losing everything. The men in suits exchanged glances, skepticism etched in the lines of their faces. They remained poised, calculating, predators surveying their prey. Mom stood her ground, her body a shield, a fierce barrier between the two suited men and whatever flicker of truth lay buried in Kevin's forgotten files. I could see the determination in her eyes, but beneath that resolute exterior flickered a thin thread of anxiety, breaking me just a little more. Then, without thinking, I turned toward Mark. What did Kevin leave behind? Where do we even start? His gaze shifted toward the corridor leading to Kevin's old office, shadows pooling in the dim light like uninvited memories. He had a bookcase filled with files somewhere in there. He hid the key to the madness he was working on. We can't let them intercept us, not now. Let's go, I insisted, grasping Mark's arm with urgency. I needed to believe there was a way through this chaotic storm, a path that could save us. As we moved cautiously down the corridor, I could feel Mom's protective presence behind us, like an anchor in our turbulent sea. The air in the hallway was stifling, each step an agonizing dance on the razor's edge of uncertainty. Every shadow flickered to life, every creak of the floorboards a reminder of the danger that loomed just beyond reach. Once we reached the office, I felt a glimmer of hope teasing at my heartstrings. The sight of the old oak bookcase brought back childhood memories, stories told moments before sleep, laughter echoing off its polished surface. I glanced at Mark, who was already scanning the shelves, his fingers brushing over the spines of books like he was seeking solace in familiar faces. Help me, he urged, urgency now palpable in his voice. I joined him, tearing through the books, glancing nervously over my shoulder. There has to be something, I whispered, fear clawing at my throat. With each book I pulled out, I felt the weight of time and secrets accumulate, pressing down on us like a sibling's unfair expectations. Suddenly, as I reached for an old leather-bound journal, a thin slip of paper fluttered from between its pages, landing softly on the floor. I hesitated for a moment before bending down to retrieve it. The handwritten note was barely legible, but certain phrases jumped out at me, words that sent shivers down my spine. We can't be afraid anymore, they will stop at nothing, the truth is buried, find the key beneath. What is it? Mark asked, his voice barely above a murmur, yet I could hear the anticipation lacing his tone. That I handed him the note, my heart pounding in my chest like a thunderous drum. The urgency in his eyes heightened, as he scanned the quickening words. This is it. He knew they would come for this, Eli. He left us a way to hide it. We need to find what's beneath. But before we could formulate a plan, a noise echoed from the other room, sharp and jarring. The two men had returned, their patience wearing thin. "We won't tell you again," the first one warned, his voice a cruel whisper now. "You have something we need, and we're more than willing to get it by any means necessary." Rising panic pounded inside my chest. I looked around, searching for anywhere to hide what we had found, grasping at any chance of protection. "Mark, where can we under the floor?" he hissed urgently, tossing aside the piles of papers to reveal a loose floorboard. My heart raced as we moved together, nervously pulling it up, revealing a hidden compartment below. As Mark reached down and pulled out a small, ornate box, something else caught my eye. The underbelly of the floor was cluttered with photographs and forgotten tokens that were stained by years of neglect. I reached down, my fingers brushing against something that felt strangely familiar. Ripping it from its resting place, I found a faded photograph of a little boy with ivy tendrils entwining a face full of mischief. That boy was Kevin. He may have been lost from our lives, but life had captured his essence, leaving behind echoes of laughter in the light. Hope trembled within me, albeit fragile, but just then, the door swung open faster than I could brace myself, revealing the looming shadows of the men, fury igniting their faces upon seeing us. "You have something that belongs to us," the second man growled, his hands reaching for the box cradled in Mark's arms. That I in that instant, as the world held its breath between us and the encroachment of danger, I felt a fierce determination rise from deep within. Whatever Kevin had hidden, whatever secrets flowed from that box, it mattered now more than ever. Would I let fear govern my life, or would I fight for the truth that could shatter our captivity? "Run!" I shouted as Mark positioned himself protectively in front. But the immediate chaos shattered, leaving an echoing silence. Out of nowhere, a loud crash erupted just outside, and the entire house trembled at its core. The scream of sirens crescendoed, but this time, it was accompanied by the thunderous sound of a desperate knock. New voices, one that none of us had anticipated. Just as the world seemed to unravel, I couldn't help but wonder who else would come to our aid, and would we discover answers or face even more treacherous questions that awaited us in this heartrending labyrinth woven through the aftermath of loss. The walls rattled with that unexpected crash as we exchanged confused glances, the atmosphere thick with tension. My heart was racing, adrenaline lending weight to every unsaid word that trembled on our tongues. I could feel Mark's eyes darting back and forth, calculating our options as the men in suits edged closer. But then another knock rattled against the door, loud and commanding, as if the universe was insisting we get answers. What was that? Mark rasped, his fierce protective instinct on high alert, the small box still clutched tightly to his chest. I barely had time to process my own confusion when the door swung open, revealing a figure draped in shadows. "Get back!" A voice called, clear and resolute. A woman surged into the room, armed with a fierce determination that momentarily eclipsed the menace of the men. Her presence was electric, an unyielding force. "Maria?" I gasped, recognizing the fierce journalist who had shared coffee and conspiratorial whispers with my father long before he had stepped into the tangled web of danger. Her eyes blinked rapidly through the dim light, assessing the chaos that blanketed the room. Behind her stood two other figures, ready with expressions set to shield and protect. "Get them out of here!" Maria shouted, urgency propelling her voice through the haze. Without hesitation, the men in suits stepped back, surprised by the sudden influx of reinforcements. Taking advantage of their momentary hesitation, we moved. Mark pushed the ornate box into my arms and grabbed my hand, his grip firm as we sprinted past the stunned men. "Where are we going?" I panted as we ducked behind a narrow corridor, my heart thrumming wildly in my chest. The adrenaline coursing through me chased away any lingering fear. To safety first. "We find the truth later," Mark replied, glancing down at the box cradled in my arms. Maria ambled beside us, her presence an anchor. We pushed through the office door and stumbled out into the misty night air. A gust of wind flashed around us, almost shaking loose the horrors we had just escaped. A flurry of voices emerged from behind us, but with every stride we took into the night, I felt the heaviness of despair dissipating, replaced by the possibility of hope. We ducked into a quiet alley, shadows dancing around us like phantoms. The distant wail of sirens blended with the thundering pulse in my ears, but amidst the cacophony was a growing sense of community that had arrived from the depths of nightmare. Eli, listen closely, Maria said, her voice solid and unwavering. We've been digging into your father's work, and it's worse than we imagined. This isn't about mere secrets, it's about bigger truths that powerful people don't want out. He was onto something. We believe he found evidence linking several influential figures to criminal activities. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating yet laden with possibility. It was a truth I had craved but now felt terrified of facing. How deep did this go? How many lives were intertwined in my father's fight? I clutched the box like it would reveal answers and secrets, mysteries long buried, but the guys who came for you they know were out here, Maria continued, glancing nervously down the alley. They're not going to stop. They want whatever's inside that box, and if we don't uncover it before they do. Her voice trailed off, and the weight of fear resurrected itself in my heart. That I glanced at Mark, the flicker of determination in his eyes battling the shadows of uncertainty. What if the evidence Kevin found is what they needed to silence him? What if uncovering it puts us at risk too? Maria stepped closer, her expression resolute. It's a risk we have to take. People have already sacrificed too much to let this go. We owe it to Kevin to expose the truth. As our breaths mingled, the chilling bite of raw terror slowly began to twist into defiance, an unholy alliance veiled in determination under the waning light of the street lamp flickering beside us. Let's do it, then, Mark said, a fire igniting behind his words. Let's find out what my dad was working on and finish what he started. For him, hope blossomed inside my chest, fragile but burgeoning with promise. But even as this fire burned bright, a paralyzing fear loomed over us, thick as the fog surrounding the streets. Suddenly, from the end of the alley, a figure appeared. The worn expression was familiar as my heart fell into a dangerous knot. Dad? I whispered, unable to mask the disbelief creeping into my voice. But as the figure drew nearer, the truth shattered that brief glimpse of hope. It wasn't my father standing there, but rather, someone who bore the weight of truth etched with pain. The finality of their presence sent shivers down my spine as they stepped into the glow of the streetlight. Eli, we need to talk. The night was cold and unforgiving, but it was the weight of unspoken truths that chilled me deepest as I faced the stranger before me. There stood my father's friend, James, not looking like the comforting figure he once was, but more like a herald of storms. The shadows danced erratically around him, reflecting the turmoil erupting within. That I know who you are, I muttered, the realization sitting heavily on my tongue. You shouldn't be here. But even as the protest slipped out, my heart raced with a connection that felt undeniable, one forged in the fires of memory and shared grief. That I am not here to fight, he replied, the heaviness of his voice filled with the gravity of hard-won experience. I'm here to help. We don't have much time. The urgency in his tone resonated, urging me forward into the unknown. I glanced back at Mark and Maria, the former's eyes filled with trepidation, while the latter exuded fierce resolve. What do you mean, James? I demanded, my edges fraying. What could you possibly give us that we don't already know? James stepped closer, the dim light capturing every line of worry on his face. I know where Kevin's files are hidden. The ones that matter. But they're not safe. Those men they've been watching. They're close, and if we don't act now, Kevin's legacy, his fight, could vanish permanently. As his words sank in, my heart began to pound with hope battling anxiety. Where? I asked, almost breathless. Where do we find them? His gaze softened, revealing the depths of his sorrow and regret. Back at his office, but not the one you're thinking. His real office, a location few know about. If the men in suits find us, he hesitated, letting the implications hang heavily in the air like an ominous cloud. That I clung tightly to the ornate box in my hands, the truth of our fears coiling tightly around our throats, unwilling to let us breathe while we stood at this precipice of revelation. We have to go together, Mark said bravely, his voice breaking the fragile tension. We'll find what we need, and we'll expose whatever we need to. For Kevin. The determination in his words roared back to life the flicker of hope within me. But it was James who reaffirmed our purpose, his voice steady as a lighthouse amidst the encroaching storm. "Follow me," he instructed, turning swiftly to lead the way. As we navigated through the tangled maze of streets, adrenaline coursed through my veins, buoyed by the gravity of our purpose. I felt the weight of the past lurking just behind us, of lost laughter and quiet moments now drowned in the aftermath of sorrow. But within that weight lay something glimmering possibility. James led us into the back of an old brick building, the facade worn by time but still standing firm. "This is it," he said quietly, gesturing toward a side door marked only by a simple plaque, "Keystone Research." The warmth of budding anticipation broke through the chill of fear as we opened the door, letting the scent of old paper and ink wash over us. Inside, the air was thick with the remnants of forgotten discussions and dreams, and in the far corner, a small office lay shrouded in layers of dust and memories. As my eyes scoured the room, I couldn't help but feel a churning dichotomy: the heartache of missing my father and the hope of reclaiming his memory. "Help me find it," I urged, determination lighting a fire in my chest. Together, we moved swiftly, pulling papers, flipping through old files, and rifling through the chaos to uncover what lay beneath the layers of uncertainty. But time was slipping through our fingers, and the sense of danger crescendoed with each passing moment, pulling tighter around us. Finally, after feeling like we were grasping at shadows, I spotted a hidden compartment beneath the old desk, a loose floorboard creaking as I pried it open. Inside lay folders, yellowed with age, bursting with secrets that danced between truth and betrayal. With trembling hands, I handed them to James. "Is this it?" He opened the first file, poring over the documents with eyes glazed in disbelief. As he flipped through, the horror of what Kevin had discovered began to play out before us in frightening detail. This wasn't just a story of corruption, it was a web of lies linking powerful figures to the very accident that had consumed our lives. Suddenly, sirens began to wail again, creeping closer, echoing the emotions surging within. "We've got to move. Now," James urged, the urgency of our reality swarming us like shadows twisted in the dim light. Just then, an unnerving crash erupted from outside, and I felt my heart seize. Glancing between my newfound allies, I knew we had to choose. Fight or flight was no longer a question, survival depended on it. Through the pandemonium unfolding outside, the adrenaline surged once more, hair-raising and bleed of determination. I took a deep breath, holding tight to the fragments of my father's legacy, ready to navigate this perilous path that lay ahead. We stepped outside into the cool night, transitioning from inside a safe haven to an unknown world rife with danger. Through the chaos that swirled around us, I felt something shift, not just in my circumstances but within myself. I was no longer just Eli, the child swallowed by grief. I was part of a story beyond comprehension, standing at the forefront of a battle for truth, ready to reclaim my family's legacy and find solace in the heart of the storm. As we dashed down the alleyways, heartbeats sinking with a collective resolve, one thought remained clear and unyielding: together, we would face whatever came our way, and no matter how heartbreaking the truth may be, it would finally bring us the closure we needed, a bond forged in fire and sacrifice. And as we reached the last corner, I took one final glance back at the dimly lit building that had just become our refuge. In the face of danger, the courage in our hearts ignited a blazing trail of defiance and hope. That we may have lost everything we held dear, but together, we were more than shadows of the past, we were the flame daring to reshape the future. We were ready to face this storm, together. We vanished into the night, held aloft by love and the promise of unearthing the buried truths that defined our Levisa reckoning, that was determined to shine a light on the darkness that obscured our past. And as we pressed forward, a strange comfort swelled in my heart, a whisper of assurance that whatever lay ahead, we would find our way, and we would rise again. That in the end, we were the family woven together by the fibers of grief and resilience, and perhaps, we could once again discover the warmth of forgiveness amidst the relentless chill of the night. And on that ethereal thread of hope, I found an unexpected courage, a promise that no matter how turbulent the journey may become, we would face the storm as one, igniting the power of a new beginning in the heart of despair. With that thought, I smiled against the burgeoning dawn, ready to live a truth that our love would pave with grace, for even in the murkiest of shadows, the light of hope shimmered brightly, beckoning us onward, a silence no longer whispering but roaring within.